You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show, and here on Newsfile we put Ghana first. Ibrahim Kopa in Tamale says that there is no doubt that the police action in recent times has cut a slur on the government's human rights record. Okay, the government must, as a matter of urgency, look into the current modus operandi of the police, where in a democratic environment and democratic policing should the catchphrase and military policing. Okay, I didn't get the last bit, but Kofi Atta in Cambridge says that, in the UK, says that police brutality and extrajudicial killings in Ghana is very disturbing. Regarding the woman beaten at the savings and loans company, she must sue the bank, the Ghana police, and police officer himself for the following reasons. One, the bank instructed the officer to escort her out of the bank and failed in its duty of care to ensure her safety. Okay, you are re-echoing what Occupy Ghana is saying. Ghana police failed to provide appropriate training to the officer in the use of reasonable force, and the police officer acted over and above what his duty calls in the use of reasonable force. Michael Amini in Great Britain, he says that, as a matter of fact, the conduct of the police beating mercilessly a vulnerable woman at a bank was unprofessional, very barbaric, and wickedness at the highest level that should be condemned outright. If this police officer has a wife, I hope he will not have done such inhuman treatment to a woman, and he will pay dearly for the consequences of his action on each okay, you wanted to say on earth, meaning heaven, right? The citizenry is losing confidence in the Ghana police of late because of the negative practices that they have been indulging themselves in. We sent them to a peacekeeping operation. Then we go and rape vulnerable women. Okay, that's also an allegation that is being investigated at the level of the UN. Is that not so? Shame onto Ghana police. Okay, why do we bunch them all up like that? Is it the case that all of them are that way? Ejadam says that, when I watched the video of the well-built police officer assaulting the helpless and vulnerable woman with a baby, the anger in me nearly exploded. Then all of a sudden, I just calmed down, and my inner friend said to me, "Hold on, Ejadam, you are angry. Is it because you are watching the video? What about those men who beat their wives? Those boys who beat their girlfriends? What about men who beat women? Is it because you don't have those videos?" I agree with you, my inner friend. I don't need to watch this video to speak out. I must always speak out against all forms of assault against women. Shame on you if you are a man and you beat a woman. Say no to women beaters. Okay, so that's a Jadam, a very long one from him. So, even though I can see that that's your concentration as far as those of you sending us the messages are concerned, but we have to move on. And next up, maybe the next time we hear about the woman, we pray not, but she may be going to the University of Ghana Medical Center. That is a medical facility that, unfortunately, has had to be put on hold for a long while, and then there was an interim management committee that was set up, and finally this week government ensured that it was opened, and they are treating people for free, only referrals for free for the first 3 days. So what's there to celebrate about this? Some people say, okay, so government has done it, should have done this long ago, so why should we be applauding the government for anything it has done? Yes, Gideon.
Thank you, Samson. So this is an equally important topic. in sharp contrast to what we have discussed earlier. This is good news, and the issue of medical care, it's very, very important, and all of us are concerned about it. So when the University of Ghana Medical Center issue came up, and there were arguments from the university side, arguments from the Ghanaian public, and then arguments from government, the bottom line was that the hospital was not in use and people could not access it to access quality medical care. It was the commitment of government that the medical center opens up to the public for use. I don't see which government would want to see the throwing out of government money from government envelope or whatever it is to build up such a facility, and when it is ready for use, it will not be put to use. But the arguments were given as at the time that the facility was not ripe for use. And in fact, even if you look at what has been done so far, it has not been open to walk-in patients. It has been open for referral patients or patients who have been referred. It means that the facility as is today is not in a complete shape to function effectively as a full-fledged hospital. The good thing is that government has taken steps to ensure that whatever financial shortages that ought to be provided to make the facility functional is provided. And I was very elated when about 3 days ago we went to present the budget statement in Parliament, and before that the Speaker and then the clerks of Parliament laid the financial agreement that government is seeking to support the medical center for it to be completed was put before Parliament. And so I'm told that Parliament has approved, I don't know, Your Honourable, if that is the case, you have approved about 47 million euros for the university phase 2.
It's a loan.
It's a loan for phase 2 of the hospital. It tells you the commitment from the side of government. Government is committed to ensuring that every Ghanaian has access to quality.
Tell me this,
medical
what
care.
new has been done to the facility before it got opened?
In fact, on top of my head, I will not be able to provide that information because I don't have daily briefing.
It doesn't appear practically that anything was
what
done.
Happens at the Ministry of Health.
Therefore, the argument is right that what happened was needless.
Sami, on the surface of it, you may want to put it that way, but I should also want us to be cautious here that it will be surprising that nothing new has been done. You see, sometimes something new we are talking about may not necessarily be in the form of infrastructure. But you see, in the management of hospital management is something that involves a lot of things. Some are soft, some are hard things to be done before the management or running of the hospital can happen. So you may have seen the infrastructure. You may think that everything is okay, but in terms of processes and procedures, how to ensure that you've been able to recruit the personnel who have the capacity to discharge the duties that you want them to discharge, and all of that may not have been done. And so government would never have sat down to renege on the responsibility to open the hospital.
The Minister
without any
had announced that the facility was not ready because of the absence of certain facilities, including a generator, which was a major issue. Now, JoyNews television went and showed the presence of the generator, which he claimed was not in existence. You know, so if we are opening it now, I expected to hear that this was missing, that has been fixed, and that is why we can now operate it.
Yeah, so it's fair to say that there may have been some information deficit that has not been provided as to what has happened to change the status quo for the hospital to be open. But I want to remind you that when these issues came up, the Minister for Information, Dr. Mustafa Hamid, came out with the government position, stated that in July, the hospital is going to be opened to the public for assessing medical care. It tells you
some time after all the campaign.
And the import of that is that if at the time that the minister made the information, the hospital could be opened, they could have opened it. Okay. And so for the government to come out to say that we are hoping that by this time we would have put in place whatever shortages in terms of preparedness or infrastructure that ought to be provided that we don't have today. It tells you that really it was not ready at the time. And so we have to give that benefit of the doubt to government, because I don't see why a government would decide that we have the facility, people can go in and use it and pay money to government, can generate revenue to government, and government says I won't open it. But government also have to ensure that it is not opening a facility for people to go and use, and instead of getting medical care, they go and contract diseases or sicknesses. So that has to be established. But the good news, bottom line, is that today we are seeing good signs that it has been open for referral basis, and government has also moved ahead to get additional funds to equip it to make sure that the phase 2 is completed for people to use it. I think this is good coming from government, and we all have to accept it and assure ourselves that we have the facility.
Aaron Lawson, who was at the launch, he said a few things that you may want to listen to. Let's listen to that, and then we return, and I pose my next question to the Member of Parliament, those who have approved this new loan to assist it, after we have expended $217 million on this particular project, and President Mahama inaugurated or commissioned it in 2016, and here we are, now we are opening, and we are opening it limited for only outpatients.
To the so-called impasse or tussle between the University of Ghana and the Ministry of Health, that has been resolved. This facility is now a partnership between the government and the university. So that has been resolved, and that is why you see colleagues from the university as part of the interim management committee working with us. No, we need to do the right things. This facility has been built not just as an ordinary facility. It's been built for a particular niche, and it is not meant to be your normal OPD where you walk in. So we're not going to, there may be some provisions for walk-in maybe later, but we're not going to start with looking at patients who just walk in. The facilities are not meant for walk-ins. This is not your ordinary hospital. In fact, this is meant to be the highest referral center in the country. So the teaching hospitals are even expected to refer cases to this facility. So it is important that this facility is not swamped or inundated with conditions that can be managed in other facilities. And we will need your help to educate the general public about this, because it will take away from the core business of this facility. And the core business of this facility is to train health professionals to the highest level.
Right, so that's Professor Aaron Lawson. He's the acting CEO of the University of Ghana Medical Center. What do you say about what he has to say and the fact that we have now opened it?
Well, I think first we have to understand the policy intent of putting together that hospital. And I think that government's policy on the use of that facility hasn't really changed from the original policy intent. You recall that this hospital was constructed as part of a number of hospitals. The main reason was to decongest the University of Ghana Medical School, the Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital, but to provide an opportunity to relocate the medical school itself back to the University of Ghana, because that is originally where that facility should have been. But to be able to decongest Korle-Bu and 37 Military Hospital, we had to encourage the construction of a maritime hospital to the west in order to take pressure from that end that comes all the way here. And also to put this up to take the pressure from basically all the tertiary facilities that were referring to Korle-Bu and creating a bigger congestion at Korle-Bu. So that was the original focus. So we knew also that to be able to get to the point where we got a fully fledged hospital, we didn't have the muscle to do it all at a go. So we needed to phase the project. Now, phasing the project meant that phase 1 had to be completed up to a state where it could accommodate a certain level of service. then phase 2 will complement and give us the complete hospital that we need. So the facility that was contracted recently is part of the original plan. Whether NDC or MPP were in government, if we decided to pursue the original policy intent, that second phase would have had to happen. We did the same with the teaching hospital in Tamale. It had to be developed in phases because you don't have the financial muscle to do it. I believe strongly that what has delayed the opening of this hospital has been more of boardroom wrangling than anything else. How do you manage that in the face of mounting public outcry? You recall this one man who took it upon himself to demonstrate everywhere about the opening of the university, whilst government through the Ministry of Health and the university were basically locked up in determining how the governance structure of the hospital would look like. And that dragged on. I want to believe that that was essentially what the issue was. Otherwise, what was it that was supposed to be provided in the phase 1? What was the level of funding for the phase 1? Have there since been any variation to the scope of phase 1? And for which reason we say because of the variation there was inadequate funding of phase 1, and for which reason phase 1 and opening it up had to delay. That is not the issue. The issue about whether there's a generator or what have you, I don't really want to go into much of that because it's all about how you manage. It is not everything you can come and tell the public that, look, we're at loggerheads with the university. We are trying to find out how we can best manage this facility to the best, to serve the interests of government.
It's a very major difficulty. It's a 650 bed facility.
Exactly.
And it is opened only for OPD. That tells you that the problem is enormous.
Yeah, but I'm saying that you also have to understand that even if you open the entire facility, the policy intent is not for that facility to deal with the general, secondary, and primary healthcare issues. In fact, it is supposed to be a specialist hospital, not even at the level of our tertiary financial. You know, we have different levels of our healthcare. We have the primary healthcare, which we find in our CHIP compounds and our polyclinics. Then we have the secondary healthcare, which is provided by the regional hospitals. Then we have our tertiary healthcare, which is provided by the teaching hospitals and 37 military hospitals. Then this is supposed to be a fourth layer we didn't have in the country. We didn't have this level of the layer. So this is supposed to be an extremely specialized facility.
Okay.
That basically allows these tertiary hospitals, when they have a challenge beyond them,
that issue is not in controversy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So if you open and you say we're only taking referrals, ordinarily that is what the hospital was built for.
That's only OPD.
Well, OPD, maybe, I can't explain why, but they probably are still dealing with capacity. Okay, you have a facility. Do you have the full complement of staff? You are probably still recruiting in order to have the entire facility.
That's another
but
issue.
Again,
a member of the IMC, that's the Interim Management Committee, Dr. Dairos Osei, said that, you know, advertisements have been run to get a substantive CEO and other administrative staff for the facility.
Yes.
But we knew ahead of the problems that came that people had been interviewed, they have been selected, everything was almost done. So what is happening? Is it that they are throwing away the first, you know, recruitment and doing a fresh one? What is going on?
You see, I tried to resist that level because we know what happened at Ridge when people were thrown out. Where is Anaba at Ridge? He was thrown out. And people have been thrown out. So yes, a government inherits a facility. People have been recruited. Obviously, they don't look like MPP people. You have to change them. That is the reality.
That's not the case.
But that is the reality. Listen. I didn't want to go into those things, but we know that those are the realities.
I don't know of
several institutions. You see, I don't interrupt. When you are talking, I don't interrupt.
No, but these are professionals.
I'll give you time to react.
I keep quiet when you are talking.
Talk about medical doctors.
I disagree with you when you speak. You see, I disagree with you when you speak. So whether you disagree with me, let me move on.
He stopped, so proceed.
Exactly so. Yeah. It is something we have seen across different agencies in Ghana. It is not only with this facility. It is not only with Ridge Hospital. It is to do with what is happening, the politicization of the civil service itself, where people have been moved on. It is a general trend. But to say that all this while, this hospital was not ready for phase 1, without any sign of any variation and funding gap, okay, would be very difficult for me to understand. But at the bottom of it is that it's been open today. We are happy it's been open. It has to provide the full scope of services to the people of Ghana. But we want to believe that whatever boardroom wrangling that was going on has been truly and genuinely solved, and not to come and window dress for us only to go back in there and there's incompatibility.
Okay.
All we want is a facility that is functioning, and that is the point I want to make.
Yes. Koku, so do you suspect that but for the intensity of the campaign, the public campaign against keeping the place under lock and key, when there were the facilities were there, we're even told that some of them might rust and some of them might even face certain difficulties because of non-use? People like the one-man protester, that's a student, Reginald Sechi Brown. If all of this had not happened, will we be here today?
Well, even without those things, we shouldn't be here today. I think we should have been able to operationalize the facility much earlier. The problems were known, the challenges were known. You focus on them and you deal with them. I had a difficulty with government communication relative to this matter. One time it was the question of generation of power, that's generator. Another time it was lack of funds, but listening carefully to the Professor
Lawson.
Yes, I began to think that perhaps maybe I hadn't done a good job in analyzing the whole thing, because if you listen to him carefully, in spite of all the agitations and the noise and the things, including what I did myself, it appears there were still certain things that ought to be done that had not been done. Forget the generator bit and the lack of funds bit, which I think the health minister said in parliament at one time. So whilst I had a problem with government communication, I'm beginning to think that beyond the communication deficit, there were real challenges that had not been tackled. We still hear things like they are talking of training, recruitment and training at this stage. So if they had opened it 12 months ago, what would have been the staffing position? I heard Mr. Segwefia, in dealing with some of the challenges that came up, saying that the NDC administration actually recruited some people and sent abroad for training. How long does the training take? Were those people being trained abroad, assuming without admitting that's true, were they prepared to come and man the facility?
The University of Ghana had given sufficient information about the roadmap as to what they had done so far to operationalizing it. And from what they did, there was no sign that the phase 2 was supposed to be an inhibition.
Yeah, but the phase 1, we are not I'm focusing on phase 1.
Yes.
And whether it was in the state for it to be activated, for it to provide the services that it was supposed to provide. What was it? What was the concept? What was the project that they had defined that this phase 1 had to do? Okay, the only time government communication became clearer, in my candid opinion, was somewhere in May. And that is where we have arrived at. If you recall the statement that was issued on 31st May 2018, I think it's signed by Curtis Perry Okudutu, where he made a point of an interim board having been set up, and that between May and July, the operations will start. And that is what has happened. But even now, if you listen to what it's supposed to do, it is not a comprehensive thing. What you're supposed to do now.
Okay.
It's not the way some of us thought. Even when the no bed syndrome came, people linked it.
Right.
You remember? So, to be honest with you, whilst I blame government for its own communication deficits, I think that perhaps we also didn't have much information as to what really the state of affairs was. No, whatever it is, bottom line is being opened. It will go in phases. I mean, step by step, so that the right things can be done. That's what my position is. I'm beginning to think that perhaps one also was a bit in a hurry related to some of the issues I raised.
Prof, what do you have to say? The university community was so unhappy about the tussle that began all of the delay, so to speak.
Yes, and I am not speaking on behalf of the university.
Right.
So I think that certainly when the facility was commissioned somewhere 2016, I think it appeared it wasn't fully ready, more or less like in terms of the takeoff. And it's not the only facility. The way we politicize projects in this country, who started it, who completed it, and how the glory should be shared, has been a problem for us as a country.
True.
And I think that, I hope that we'll use this as an opportunity to actually more or less take away these things that hold us back from genuine progress. And sometimes it's the reason why you find that you will go to a certain district and you will find 2 types of toilet, NDC toilet.
Let me make this correction before I forget. I understand that the one who spoke that I introduced as
Professor Aaron
Lawson is rather Asamoah. Is that correct, Dr. Asamoah?
Well,
he didn't look.
Okay, because the inscription that came along it was
I saw the inscription.
Right.
I'm not too sure to clarify that.
Okay.
Yes. So the point that I'm making is that, I mean, you observe across probably the entire country how these things are politicized. So sometimes you find that one government started a certain project, didn't finish, there was a change in government, and then the new government is starting almost the same project side by side. And at the end of the day, we don't get to complete the facilities, and yet the nation's money is actually held in all of that. So I want to believe that there were ownership issues.
Yeah.
We cannot run away from that also. Apart from the ownership issues, there were also issues about how originally the hospital was going to be managed through a special purpose vehicle. It doesn't look to me that was quite acceptable to government at a certain point in time. That is why per the recording, we are talking about some partnership now in managing the facility and all of that. So then there was an interim management committee and all of that. So certainly, apart from the hardcore issues, the facility and all of that, the soft side, which sometimes are even much more important in operationalizing the facility, were not totally ready, even in terms of financial clearance for recruitment and all that. So if you look at perhaps the number that had been approved, certainly it is not enough to get to the full or 100% in terms of operationalizing the issues. Even at the time that it was commissioned, we were told that additional funding were needed, not that significant though, to complete the phase 1. As for the phase 2, at least, is a different thing. But I think that you also observe that the way the whole thing was packaged, it was as though the government was against the facility and didn't want to even open it at all. That pressure, I'm not too sure it was entirely appropriate, but I think I agree with our father here, who says
I'm a very young man.
Forgive me. Within this conference, so the way government itself communicated the whole thing, and it's not the best. And I think going forward, I think we have to learn to work together, both the government and the opposition. At the end of the day, this facility is for Ghana. It may matter, but I think that who started it and who completed it shouldn't really be the issue. But I'm happy that finally it's been open, and like Honorable our MP said, the original intent was not to open it to public in terms of walking and all of that, and we were all happy to the extent that they were relocating the UG Medical School to main campus,
back to its original base.
And that would have enabled the university to scale up admission to medical school and even train for the sub-region. because you have national maths and science that is catching up with everybody. We are training so many people. People finish secondary school with very good grades and yet cannot go to the medical school and would have to find their way in other courses that really they never intended to do. So let's take the politics out of it. Let's look at the merit in all of this, and then let's move forward.
Thank you very much. Doc, you had wanted to give a little this thing. I said,
yeah, it's unfortunate that
now I can go back to the question of the acting CEO, Aaron Lawson. What I find is that it does appear the chairman of the Interim Management Committee, the IMC, Dr. Anefia Samoa-Ba, appears to be the one that was in focus here, and that the one to be the acting CEO is rather the IMC, the member of the IMC, who is Dr. Dairos Osei. Okay, so if there are any other, straightening ups that ought to be done about the way he was labeled, please let us know. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the unconventional consensus here is that the center was not ready for use at the time that we expected it to be put to use.
It is still not ready, is it?
It is still not ready. And so, and I also agree with Prof that because of political expediency, we do projects and we decide to commission the projects even when they are not ready. I know the NDC in 2016, when we were going to the elections, wanted to commission a lot of projects to take credit for, which were not ready. Commander Sugar Factory and all of that. But the University of Ghana, the University of Ghana Medical School project is a classical example of that. And we're not talking about that. We don't want to politicize. We are trying as much as possible to depoliticize. And for you to come and sit here to talk about recruitment of health professionals, doctors, nurses, and to suggest that people are not being recruited because they are not seen to be cladded with a certain political colors. It's very unfortunate, because I don't think the NDC, even if you want to go into details of it, may have people who are more educated than we have in the NPP. And so to suggest, that is just by but to suggest that because they are not NDCs, they are not being recruited, that is why we don't have personnel. Is to implicitly assume that without the NDC party, we cannot have medical doctors or nurses in this country.
Legitimate suspicion, to the extent that we knew, as far as the University of Ghana is concerned, the management of the hospital, until now, until the tussle, we knew that they had already recruited and that they were ready with, as far as recruitment was concerned. And now we're being told of advertisements to recruit. Is that not a legitimate, suspicion?
So are we provided with the names?
What do you do with that, the original
so there ought to be some evidence adduced to buttress that. Okay. Are we provided with a list of persons who were recruited and now are not called, so that we can make the argument? We cannot just talk in the vacuum. We should be able to have that evidence. Until we provide that,
that's a fair point.
All these talks are not.
Why not rebutting what he has said? He made a comment that is in bad taste. You see, it is not who is more educated than who is not.
If you want to look at people,
the number of people, that was put in the context. Don't put words in my mouth.
If you want to look at the people who are very educated, whether from the NDC or MPP side, they will fill that place. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So it is not
your
about,
suggestion that because they are not NDC,
people who are educated.
No, you imply that. You suggested that because they are not NDC, they are not being called.
To fill that place.
That was your suggestion.
No,
that is what you suggested.
That is not the point.
That is the import of the argument you made, that because they are not NDC, they are not being called, and that is why we are not getting people to fill the position.
That's why he's not being recruited.
No, but if you are not educated, you cannot be a nurse or doctor.
All right, thank you.
Is that not the case?
I'm very surprised you are not understanding.
No, I don't have to understand what you said.
We can take a break here, and when we return, of course, you know that we have the mid-year review to deal with, matters of the economy, major to deal with. We'll take a break and return, but there are a few questions too about the Lands Commission and its building, which didn't meet the value for money test, because some 30 million appears to have gone in some ways. We'll be right back.